Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of What's Your Story Live. We are on episode 4, and I could not be more excited than to be on tonight live with you. I'm Leilani Langdon, your host, and this is a space where we get to journey along the side of others so that we can be challenged to know, own, and share our stories. And so I'm excited to be here tonight. If you have been part of the What's Your Story family, you know what to do. Go ahead and drop your hellos. Let me know where you're watching from tonight. If this is your first time tuning in, then I need to know that you're here for the first time. Put a hand up emoji and I will shout you out. I'd love to connect with you, but go ahead and drop your highs as you're coming in. Now, you know what? I am always going to remind you guys on a week-to-week basis that this is a community of people who are encouraging and supportive and inspiring, and the comment is a judgment-free zone. The comment section is a judgment-free zone. It's a space for us to encourage one another, support one another. More importantly, support and encourage the individual who has so courageously decided that they were going to be sharing their story with us this evening. And so I am looking forward to tonight's story. Marcy, good to see you, girl. Good to see you on. Pam. So come on in as you're continuing to say hi. Just want to remind you that this is a space for us to journey, to be inspired, and to grow. And I'm so grateful that I'm back on live. I know last week it was my birthday weekend and I took the weekend off. I went away and my husband did an amazing job at getting me a little getaway. But I missed you guys. And so I'm grateful to be back on today. I had a great weekend, birthday weekend, but then I came back and it was sheer chaos. Like, do you know, like, it's almost like I needed the respite because when I came back, the baby got sick, our car broke down. I mean, it was just one thing after another. So I was just grateful for that time away. Adrian, hello from the other side, always with the comment. Oh my goodness. But I hope you've had a wonderful week. You know, our week has been good. It has been filled with some challenges, but ultimately, I'm just glad to be here. I remember earlier today, I was a little bit down. I don't know what it is. You know, sometimes we just kind of go through some lulls, and a lot of it was based on what I was thinking and telling myself. And I remembered the movie Soul, because my kids and we watch movies every Sunday night. So they're doing that currently while I'm here. But one of the movies that we have watched a lot has been Soul. Not more than Encanto, because Encanto trumps all. But one of the things that was so powerful today in remembering, and in that time where I was not feeling great, and I wanted to share with you guys, because I think it's such a powerful reminder for anybody at any stage of life. So at the end of Soul, Joe Gardner, who's he's passionate about jazz. He has been looking for this big break, this big moment in his life to culminate, making it, and reaching his goal and succeeding. And he goes through all of these things, he dies, he comes back, he gets a second chance. And at the end, he finally gets to play with Dorothea Williams, right? This big jazz artist. And, they have an amazing time. And at the end of the show, they walk outside and everybody's like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, hold on a second, like something is missing. And he's looking around and he's like, so what happens now? And she says something that I want to read to you, because it's such a powerful analogy, that I think would be so helpful for us. So she says, her exact statement, let me pull it up here. She says, I heard this story about a fish. He swims up to an older fish and says, I'm trying to find this thing they call the ocean. The ocean? The older fish says, that's what you're in right now. This, says the young fish, this is water. What I want is the ocean. And it was a powerful moment and a reminder that so many of us go through life wanting to reach that thing, whatever that thing is, dream, purpose, a goal, a career goal, a familial goal, an amount of money, an amount of success. And we often miss the fact that there's so much joy, and there's so much purpose, and there's so many miracles that happen on the way to attaining and reaching that particular goal. And that the reality is that when we get there, we often find that it has left us unfulfilled. It's not as exciting as we thought it would be. And so today I want to encourage you that it's often on the journey towards the thing we're pursuing that we find fulfillment, that we find meaning, that we find understanding, and that where the miracles happen. And so I just want to remind that to you when you're experiencing, or you're struggling, or you're experiencing a little bit of doubt along this journey, or a little bit of emptiness. I want to remind you to stop and look around. And that's exactly what I did today. I was feeling a little down, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna be present in what I know is meaningful. And one of those things are my children. So I literally sat on the couch, and Elijah was playing on my lap, and I just was watching the kids laugh, and it brought so much joy in the midst of what I was feeling, and that went away. And so today, I want to remind you of that. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest for tonight, who I'm excited to kind of sit and journey through this story with. But as always, we want to give him a warm welcome. So get your clapping emojis ready for a warm welcome. Also, if you have a question for him as he's sharing his story, go ahead and hashtag question during the live, and we will answer those questions as we're going through. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to bring him on. Miguel.
Hey.
Hey, Miguel, how are you doing?
I am well. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was amazing to be away and not have any responsibilities. And
yes, responsibilities are hard.
Oh my gosh. But Miguel, tell the What's Your Story community. Tell us who you are.
Sure. I am an individual who is from some humble beginnings here in Rochester, New York. My mother, she migrated from Puerto Rico when she was about 18 years old. And when she moved to Rochester, it was there that she met an individual whom is my father. And I am the second oldest of six children. So pretty big family.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's where the genesis of me starts. Really, actually, although that's kind of the root origin of my story, but really for me it began when I was 15 years old, where I met a pastor who really just started pouring into my life, and that's
Mm.
really where everything kind of changed for me.
So I'm excited then. I'm excited. You're getting some hellos here. So let's just jump right in, Miguel. So go ahead and tell us what's your story.
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for the space, the opportunity. Thank you for everyone who's connected, who would take an interest. My story, again, I'm part of this big family, but part of this Latin community. And one of the things within the Latin community is that we don't talk about our emotions. We don't
Talk
talk
about
about
it.
our feelings, even
Yes.
more so if you're a guy. If you're a guy, you don't
Yeah.
talk about your feelings. It's just not kosher. It's not what we do. And so, for me, it has been a journey to get to a point where I can
Mm.
be honest with myself in those emotions. And what really hit me hard was the moment that my first daughter was born. When my first daughter was born, that was the
Mm.
moment where all of these emotions that I had just compartmentalized and tossed to a corner, those were the moments that was the moment that it really just started coming back. When you do spring cleaning,
Mm.
that's when you realize, wait a minute, I got some
Mercy.
junk that I've been storing up that I don't need no more. and
Right.
and it was at that moment, particularly one night I was putting my daughter to sleep, and I remember we were living in this 2-bedroom apartment, my wife and
Mm-hmm.
we had our first daughter, and there I was trying to put her to bed, and she fell asleep in my arms. And in that moment I began to ask myself, why would someone not want to be in this? Why would someone not want to
Mm.
be with their child? Why would someone walk
Yeah.
away? I mean, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. And
Wow.
I will admit to you, I tried to ignore those feelings. And when I tried
Mm.
to ignore them, it built in me resentment, frustration,
Mm.
irritation, and more questions. It really wasn't until the moment that my mother passed away when I reached to my father and
Mm.
I said, when my mom was in the hospital, I was with her. I shut my whole life down and I just went to the hospital with her.
Wow.
And I was fearful because at that moment, I said to him, at that moment, I don't think I would do the same thing for you. and
Wow.
and
That's
that's
real.
that's yeah, that's heavy, that's real. And that was my opening line after some years of silence between he and I.
Wow. Wow.
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, yeah, go ahead, this is your show.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you because you were going there, and I didn't want to interrupt that. What was his reaction?
He, we took a moment of pause, and he was going to begin to say something, and I interrupted him. And I said,
Mm.
I want you to know that I come into this space, into this relationship with no expectations. Because to be honest, previously we had tried to make it work, but there was so much expectations, right? The expectations of, man, I wish you were there when I was 10. I wish you were there when I graduated. I wish you were there when I met my wife. I wish you were there when these, and all of these thoughts of unfulfilled realizations. And it created in me expectations that really, it's no fault of his, but he was never going to meet. And even when he attempted, he wasn't going to be able to
Yeah,
satisfy that little kid in me. And so in this
for sure.
particular instance, I said, you know what? I want you to know that I come here with no expectations whatsoever. If you call, great. If you
Mm.
don't call, great. If you visit, great. If you don't visit, great. If you want to be a grandfather, great. If you don't, great. Whatever it is that you decide to do, great. However, I would want to be there if you're on your sick bed. And right
Mm.
now, I don't think I could be, just because
Mm.
I didn't feel that sense of connection. That actually opened up the door where he could then begin to tell me his story, a story that I was not
Mm.
familiar with, a story that had to do
Wow.
with addiction, abuse, adoption, things that I said, wait a minute, I had no
You didn't
idea. And that
know.
all started for him at a very young age. When I began to
Wow.
hear his story, it made me understand what I could not understand when I was holding my
As a child.
daughter
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
young, which is, it's not that he didn't want to be there, it's that he couldn't be there because what I needed, he couldn't provide. And it was that moment that I was able to
Mm,
realize that. Now, getting in tune with my emotions has helped me not just within my marriage, not just with him, not just as
sure.
a leader, but also as I continue to grow in the things that are before me, as I continue to grow in what I call my God given purpose, and as I continue to
Sure.
use the God given talents.
Hmm. So what was your experience with him growing up? What was it that led to these feelings of resentment that maybe you stuffed down and ignored because that's what was culturally acceptable, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So my father and my mother divorced before I was two. My mother
Hmm.
remarried, and she remained married until her passing day. So she was married for about 26 years.
Wow.
My father, on the other hand, struggled with addiction, and that addiction not
Hmm.
only had him coming in and out of reality, but in and out of my
Yeah.
life and in and out of jail. And
Wow.
oftentimes it was that same addiction that just drew him away. And so even when he was physically present, it wasn't emotionally connecting. So there are a few
Mm,
memories that we do have where we can say, "Hey, remember when we did this?" But
sure.
those are far and few. And
Yeah.
so it was though the absence of those memories of
Mm,
not being able to be pushed in the playground by him or learning how to ride a
mm,
bike with him. Those were things that, I'm very grateful that I had a stepfather who took a role to be there, but while I'm grateful, that wasn't his role. That I was, and
you,
so
mm-hmm.
those were the things that I had just kind of left it alone. I was like, well, at least I have him. But to be honest, here, when my mother passed away, my entire family just kind of, I
Wow.
didn't realize how much she was the glue of that
The
family, how much she was the
matriarch.
glue of that household. And so then it's like, wait a minute, I had a stepfather, but now he's gone. And so I'm still
Wow.
learning how to be a father, even though I have three daughters. Like I'm still learning and trying to be a better father, be a better husband. We bought a house, and it's like, wait, now I got to learn how to be a plumber too. Like, so,
They
so
don't tell
just
you that when you
having,
buy a house.
yeah, they don't tell you that. So having that point of reference,
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah.
of who do I go to?
Right.
There, it was very important for me to be able to have that relationship with my dad, because he's really been a point of reference, and not just in those things of how to be a better father, how to be a
Yeah.
better believer, leader. I mean, but he's really been a point of really connecting towards what's ahead and maintaining that type of focus. So I can report today that our relationship is in an awesome place, but it started with
That's
the
amazing.
realization, which again, culturally, for Hispanics, for Latins, it's like, hey, we don't talk about that. It's kind of like
Yeah.
Bruno. We don't talk
Talk
about that
about
either.
Listen, that song was so powerful
It
because
was
you're right. I think every family has that thing that you don't want to talk about, especially
right,
within the Hispanic culture. And I love that you touch on that because you had that double layer. It's not only just the familial culture of where we don't talk about we're very uncomfortable with emotions and
right.
the array of emotions and talking about them, but also to be a male and to have that added pressure, right? To have to navigate all of these difficult scenarios and not have a place to express them or share them. I loved when you talked about the fact that it's like, yeah, your stepfather was there and you're so grateful that he was there. But the reality is, there are people that probably say, well, at least you had someone, right? But,
Right.
tell me, as a child, like, did you did you notice those moments, right? Like where it's like, okay, he's here, but you wished there was your actual dad was there. What was that like? I mean,
Yeah, so it was an interesting thing, because here's the thing. My dad, as I mentioned, he struggled with addiction, and that addiction kept
mm-hmm.
him in and out. Now, my
Yeah.
stepfather, he also had an addiction. He was an
Mm.
alcoholic.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so that once he got into that liquid, it was a different person. And it was in those
Mm.
moments where it's like, man, the things he say, the things he does were very, it would penetrate. It was tough to digest as a kid. And of course, that's when
Sure.
you're like, man, you know I wish I had a hero at this moment. And that's really that moment where,
Gotcha.
wait, I have a dad. Oh, but wait, even if I
He's
called
not
him, he
here.
wouldn't be here. And those were those moments
Mm.
where it was real for me to be able to distinguish this isn't my dad. Even though, to be honest, early on in my childhood, I loved him like a dad to the point where I was like, forget it, my dad ain't never gonna be there, so I might as well change my last name. And it was a real dialogue that I
Yeah.
had about taking those steps. But then again, there was those moments where it's like, this, even if I love him like a dad, he just ain't. And
He
you
just
know, to
isn't.
me, the concept of a stepfather is not for someone to be stepped on, but rather someone that would help you step into what others could not. And so I hold
I love that.
individuals who are stepfathers in a high regard, stepmothers in a high regard, because
Yeah.
it's not an easy job to take a
No.
role that others could not take, rather because of their life circumstances or whatever
Yes.
happened. They really take that position of saying, I'm going to help this person, this child, step into what they have to. So I take that in high regard, but the reality is, on the other side, as a child, as the person who's having the step parent, there are these moments that cannot be ignored, which is like,
Yeah.
that's right, I forgot. You are here, but it's not.
Mm.
It's just a deeper connection that
Yeah.
is missing.
Yeah, like a void. So
Right.
tell me, you mentioned that you were, you're putting your daughter to sleep, and all of these emotions kind of came creeping up. You know, um, did you recognize what they were in the moment? Like, how did you come to a place coming from the culture, being a man, coming from the culture that you came from? How are you even able to start beginning to put words to these feelings, right? And to be okay allowing yourself to make the shift, because I think a lot of us can feel those emotions, but the way that we deal with them may not be healthy, especially if we were never taught or we never saw how to deal with them in a healthy way.
Yeah. I don't know how I knew necessarily, but I just remember putting her down to bed and just saying, you know, growing up there was a show which I'm sure many have seen, which is The Fresh Prince, right?
Yeah, 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 of
And
course.
there's this episode that as a kid resonated so heavy with me. There's this episode where Will Smith's father finally arrives in the picture, and he makes these promises to him, right? And at the end, there's this
Yes.
powerful scene
Oh
where
my
Will
gosh.
and Uncle Phil, and he's like, "How come he don't want me?"
Yes,
And
crying. Yeah. Oh
oh
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
listen,
powerful.
listen. That I listen. That to me, I can remember watching that episode. I'm like, yeah, how come he
Mm.
don't want me? Like, but
Yeah,
it's
so real.
those scenes, and fantastic that art has the ability to really just help you tap into something that otherwise you wouldn't be able to. But I
Mm.
think things like that, shows like that, episodes like that, really kind of laid the seed. And when that moment came that I was putting my daughter to bed, it was just that feeling of, how come he don't want me? And so it was being able to
Mm.
draw back to that. I really resonated with that scene because it was that moment of, how
Yeah.
come he don't want me? How come he
Yeah.
wasn't there? And that really allowed me to put voice to it.
Mm. So what was the next step for you? Like, how did you then take the next step to say, I'm not going to perpetuate the same things that I saw and the same ways that I was raised? How am I going to be different? Like, what was that? How did that happen for you?
So, after I realized that there was these emotional situations, I started talking to my wife about it. But
Mm.
I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, I quickly called him. No, it took some time before I
Yeah.
made that leap. And while there were these moments that I tried to make the connection, as I previously mentioned, I would always go into it with expectations. So,
Mm.
it wasn't until really about 2016 when my mother passed away where I was
Mm.
able to then communicate. My daughter now is 8 years old, and I have a
Mm.
a second daughter who is 6 year old and a 2 month old baby.
Oh.
So a 2 year old baby. I'm sorry, I took her way back there. Um, but I say all that to just bring content that it wasn't like I came to the realization. I said, okay, now I'm ready to make a change. No, it was okay. I came to the realization, and then I was like, okay, I don't. I'm still not ready to talk to him.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
still
yeah.
not ready to make the steps that I know that would require to actually
Mm.
be able to dialogue. And so it took some years, some time for me to be able to get to a place where I had no expectations. Now, once I
Mm.
got to that place, I was able to openly have a communication and say, hey, there's no expectations here. So by the end of year one, where we sat down and it was like, hey, we probably could have done better of getting together. We could have done this, we could
Sure.
have done that. And I was like, no, 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 no. Not that we could have, because I'm not expecting anything. What I would say is this year is behind us. Next year, if you feel like we can do better, then do better. and
Yeah, yeah,
and so
yeah.
by just cleaning the slate, by just here, there it is, boom, no
Yeah.
expectations. That's it.
Yeah.
If and then obviously as the relationship began to just draw a little closer, then it's like, okay, now let's define expectations. If I text you, I expect you to text me back. If I call
Yeah.
you, I expect you to call me back. And if you call me, I will call you back. And if you text me, I will text you back. Right. So initiating from a place of no expectations, and then being able to move forward and say, okay, now that we're getting serious, now that we are really getting together here and
Yeah.
creating a bond, let's start defining what the expectations are so that we can keep that trajectory, as opposed to just pulling back and saying, when you were 10, you never did this. It just,
Yeah.
at this point, it's like, bruh, it don't matter. It just doesn't matter.
I loved that you talked about earlier, and it connects to what you just said, but I love that you had a moment where you and your father were able to have this honest conversation and this courageous conversation about his story. And, I think a lot of us as children, we don't often recognize the struggles that our parents have gone through as a result of their own trauma and the result of their own childhood experiences. And, you can't do better if you don't know better. And that's
Right.
just the truth, right? And
Right.
as children, we don't have the ability to understand that. But I love that you said that you were open enough to allow him to share his story. And in doing that, you were able to see him from a different perspective. You were able to see your story and your own childhood from a different lens. Not that it takes away from the trauma or the pain or the frustration or the days that he wasn't there, but it allows it to give a different meaning to those moments, right?
Exactly.
And then be able to have that moment and say, you know what, from here on out, we're not going to dwell on what was. Let's focus on what is. And I love that perspective because I think it empowers the ability, like you said, to start from a clean slate, to be able to say we're on equal playing field now. Like
Right. Right.
we both can play a role that is different from what was. So what can we do now moving forward? I love that. You mentioned that you said at one point, I need a hero. So tell
Right.
me about that. Tell me about that experience for you. Do you feel like you mentioned at 15 interacting with someone that changed your life? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was graduating, I think we're going middle school to high school time. My mother made a decision to move to Puerto Rico. My mother actually bought
Mm.
the house that she grew up in,
Oh, that's
and
so
so
exciting.
yeah, so she made the decision. She's moving to Puerto Rico. At this point, I'm 14, about to be 15, and she says, "Okay, school is about to end. Summer is coming. I'm going to be leaving to Puerto Rico. What are you going to decide to do?" Me and my older brother, who are from this first marriage, she asks us both, "What are you two going to do? You're old enough where you can make the
To
decision. Do
decide.
you want to come with me to Puerto Rico, or do you want to go with your father?" And
Mm.
I made the decision of kind of now or never. And I said, well, this is a good opportunity for me to actually get to know him. And so I
Mm.
decided to move with him. What I did not know were the burdens or the weight of the responsibility that was on his shoulders. Because it's
Mm.
one thing to say, "Hey, I want you to live with me, son," or me say, "Hey, I want to live with you, dad." That is a wonderful thing. But then after you've unpacked everything, after you say, "This is your room, this is the things," then the reality sets in. Hey, what's for breakfast? Hey, where are things gonna get paid from? Hey, what school do I go to? And all of these
Mm.
elements which we had not interacted with before become
Yeah.
so real.
Yeah, for sure.
And the weight of it, really drew him to make decisions that were familiar from his past. And so
Mm.
those decisions, I remember my mother called me and said, listen, and I don't know how she knew, but my mother was a very spiritual woman, but she called one day and she said, hey, I know things aren't going well over there, and you're gonna have to leave. And I said, wait a minute, no, everything is okay, because I was trying to preserve this possibility of a relationship. And she said,
Yeah.
no, I know things aren't going well, you're gonna have to leave there. And I said, no, everything is okay. She said, I'm gonna give you a week. I said, a week for what? She said, a week to meet me at the airport, or I'm gonna go over there. Now,
No.
my mother was
Oh
a
my
spiritual woman,
gosh.
but she was kind of like, I don't know if you've heard the Toby Ngwagwe song where he said, try Jesus, but don't try me. That was my
She
mother.
was
My
half
mother
hood, half
was,
holy.
yeah. So I knew that if by the end of the week I
Yeah.
didn't get on the plane,
She was
she
gonna
was
be
going to
there.
be the one getting on the
Yeah,
plane.
absolutely.
And so I made the move to go to Puerto Rico, and I grew up knowing Spanish and the Hispanic, the Latin culture, but it just ain't the same. And it's not the same
Yeah,
from this perspective in Rochester, New York, to go fly over and be there on the island. It was
sure.
a culture shock. It was a massive culture shock, with language, with culture, with just the vernacular, the style, the smells. I mean, it was all a
Different.
culture shock for me. But at the same time, while that was a culture shock, it helped me understand a lot of the stories that my mother, that I did not fully know. Now, it was
Mm,
in that it was in that time period that I started going to church, and the church that I attended to had a pastor who, his name is Miguel Ayala, and Miguel was just amazing and just so pivotal
mm,
in my life, because he saw in me what I could not see in myself. And so he
mm.
would always push me to speak in public. He would always push me to be a leader, and he would always it almost seemed like he knew where I was going before I could even see the road. And
Wow.
he was just so pivotal on just saying, you can do this. And it really, he became more than a hero. He became really a father figure. And
Mm.
we found each other really in just a marvelous way, because he had several years earlier lost his older son, who his name was
Wow.
Miguel. And so,
No.
yeah, so it
Oh
became
my
this thing
gosh.
where we were
Goosebumps.
connected, not only by that, but his son, he had lost a son because of addiction. And so, I mean, we were linked in so many
Many
layers,
ways. Oh my
that this guy
gosh.
really just took a role where I was like, yo, wherever you go, I will go. No questions asked. And
Yes.
he took it to
Yes.
heart, where he would just show up and be like, I'm here to pick you up. I was like, where are we going? He said, wherever, and so he would just take me with him, and
Oh.
we would visit people, help people, we would do service in the community. But it was that, being able to
Mm.
see, and not just that, but he was so open with counsel, with advice, with his emotions, that subconsciously it just began to lay down a foundation. So I am as much his son as I am anyone else's.
That's amazing. Do you still have a relationship with him today?
I do. He is very pivotal to where I am right now.
Wow.
The spiritual disciplines that are in my life, it really, it was him. I mean,
Mm.
he's the guy who taught me how to tie a tie. And so this guy was very pivotal in my life.
Mm.
Yes.
So he really stepped in a moment, and
Yes.
some of the most pivotal, some of the most pivotal times of your life, right? Those teenage years that are so defining for you. You
Yeah.
know, I love that you said that he saw in you what you couldn't see in yourself, and I think it's so important that that we are able to pour into others in that same way, right? And I think we all have these moments where we see things in others and we don't say it. We don't tell people, right? We don't, I think it's one thing to obviously commit to taking someone in, but just the simplicity of being able to affirm somebody or affirm what you see in somebody can be really life changing. And in this moment, you said it was for you. What would you? There was a question that came in that I want to ask, but what would you tell someone else who may have had a similar experience that has had an absent father, and it just isn't sure what to do or how to navigate the scenario, what would you say to them?
I would say that if you have some form of communication, maybe you have a phone number, or email, I would
Mm-hmm.
say start there. Start with an email.
Mm,
The email is so simple because it allows you the space to say what you want to say without being interrupted. Because
yeah.
oftentimes people say, "Oh yeah, I want to hear what you have to say," but then when you start talking, they start interrupting. Obviously, in this setting, it works. Okay, in this
Yes.
setting, we dialoguing, but
For
in a
sure.
setting where it's so emotional, where it's so heavy, where
Yeah.
you can cut the tension, it's like
Sure.
we need to allow each other space where you talk, I'll be quiet, and then I'll be quiet and I'll
Mm-hmm.
let you talk. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, because everyone, right, we're all emotional beings, because everyone's emotional and everybody wants to tell their side of what's happening. It's like, okay, I think starting with an email, which is something that I did, is like, okay, let me send out this email. That's going to
Yes.
open up the line of communication. When he reaches out, then we'll set a date and then we'll go in there, and I can always go ahead and use the email as a point of reference. Hey, I said on the email this is what I mean. Let me bring further context to what I already said in the email. I
Yeah.
think that makes it so much easier. And then also being able to just go into it with no expectations. Because if you go in it
Mm.
thinking, oh, maybe this is the moment where he's gonna finally be the hero that I've been looking for, or maybe he's gonna be, I don't know, super dad or something. It's like, no, he's not. And my dad and I have a wonderful relationship, but we have a wonderful relationship in this stage in my life,
Yeah.
in my 30s. It wasn't great in my teens, but if I pull back to my teens, well, he wasn't there. He couldn't be there. XYZ
Yeah.
reason. And I think understanding where we are, okay, here's where we are. This is the
Yeah.
stage that I'm in. Can you
Sure.
be a dad here? And that's not gonna look like, that's not gonna look like what everyone else's situation looks like. And
Sure.
that's why, to me, strategy is so important, because strategy is a
Mm.
defined number of steps to help you have a breakthrough moment. And in order for
That's
us to implement
good.
strategy, you have to know where you are. And this is super important because, Leilani, you may be 10 steps closer to your breakthrough moment where I'm 5 or 20 steps away. And
Yeah.
it's like, if I stay here and compare, man, how come Leilani's so close to her breakthrough
Different.
moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Forget it. She's in her own journey. And so I
Yep.
think pulling back and being able to initiate a communication through an email and then go into it with no expectations, not comparing to somebody else, to say, okay, this is my dad.
Yeah.
This is the relationship we have had, but what relationship could we have? Another thing is that oftentimes people say, well, there is no relationship. And they assume that because, well, we're not talking, that there is no relationship. No, we do have a relationship. It's just not a healthy one. Right. The
Mm.
only way I can't have a relationship with you is if I don't know you. If I don't know you at all, then how do I have a
Then there's no
relationship with you?
relation,
But
right?
if I know you, I have a relationship
Yes.
with you. It's either going to be a healthy one or a really bad one.
Right.
Right. And so I knew I had a relationship with him. It was
Yeah.
just a really sucky one. It was just a bad
Yeah.
relationship. And the only way to change that is to go in it with pure honesty, with no expectations, and being able to
Mm.
allow each other to say their side of the story. And so, pulling back to what I said further earlier, which is when he shared his story, that gave a whole lot of understanding to my story,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was almost like an oil spill of free will. His free will
Yeah.
just rolled over onto mine, where it shouldn't be, but it is. It just
Yeah.
happens, and
It
that's the
just
way life is.
happened.
But I would say, for those who are in the experience, go that.
Yeah.
Number one, start off with a simple communication, maybe via
Sure. Sure.
email.
Sure.
Number
Sure.
two, go into it with no expectation. Number three, don't compare either to the past or to others.
I love that. Something that I may add to that. I think I would add to, I know there are people that maybe at some point they may not feel ready emotionally to take that step, right? Because that can
Mm-hmm.
feel like a very daunting step for somebody. And it seemed like you had been primed, for that experience to take place. And it almost seemed like this experience with your mom was a catalyst for that moment, right, to happen with your dad. But I think the point that I would add to everything that you said, which was, amazing, like, send an email, right?
Mm-hmm.
Open the line of
Yeah.
communication, right? Be honest, set a date, to connect and give more context, go in with no expectations, right? And be willing to be open to hear their story. I think that's such a powerful thing. And then I would say somebody who maybe is not ready to do that yet is, don't be afraid to explore the hurt, right?
Right.
Don't be afraid to explore the hurt before you take that step, because I think that's what causes the conflict, right? Is that there's so, like you said, right? There's so much tension and there's so much pain wrapped up in this moment, and it can oftentimes cause what you talked about, right? A lack of understanding and a lack of moving forward.
Yeah,
You know,
one of the things that really helped with this is early on, my wife and I, when early in our marriage, we decided to go to a marriage retreat. And in this marriage
mm,
retreat, one of the things that we did was that we actually did writing exercise. So just to kind of lay down the
mm,
view here, you arrive to this hotel, you introduce yourself, but that's the only interaction you have with people. The rest really is these
interesting.
marriages pouring out their experiences and how they dealt with it through proper communication
Yeah, 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 yeah,
strategies.
yeah.
And then the rest of the weekend, it's a notebook and a pen, and write your emotions out, write your feeling, write that experience, and then share it with your significant other. We would switch notebooks. So she would read mine, I
Yes.
would read hers. And then whatever was really penetrating, it was like, okay, let's focus
That's
on that because that seems to be
be at
a
the
talking
surface.
point. And so
Yeah.
that form of being able to write out my emotions and being able to
That's good.
write what I think and feel, and understanding that emotions within themselves are not bad,
Right.
which is something that I think we often ignore. Right? If you feel sad, angry, mad, distraught, whatever it is, while the emotion may feel sucky, right? It may be feeling bad. It
Yes.
within itself is not bad. And so it's
No.
okay for you to have that emotion. What's not okay is the action
Yes.
or attitude you take with that
I
emotion.
love that. Yep.
Understanding
Absolutely.
that has not only helped me in my marriage, but it also helped in a situation like this, of being able to
Yes.
get with him and say, okay, you know what? I'm okay that I felt bad. I'm okay that I didn't feel like you were
Yes.
there. I'm okay with that feeling, even though it sucked. It didn't feel good,
Yes.
but I'm okay with
Yes.
that feeling, and I understand that having that feeling is not bad. So for those who are not there yet emotionally, it's okay. It's
Yes.
okay to not be okay.
Okay. I
We just have
love
to get to a
that.
place to understanding
Be
that, hey,
okay
I
with
don't
that.
feel good. That's okay. But
Yes.
find people who understand that, and people that will
Yes.
actually pour back into you.
Yes.
Recently I had an experience where I felt like I was in a crossroad, really. And I just reached out to my people, to my network, and I said, here's how
Mm.
I'm feeling, here's why, and this is what I'm thinking about doing. And I'm gonna tell you something, Leilani. They talked me off the edge because I was God's still working in me, Leilani.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, of
So
course.
I would say
Listen.
find those people. You need those people who
Yes,
it's
community.
that are not just cheerleaders, but people who will be honest enough to say, hey, you could do better than this.
That is so that's so powerful and reaffirming, I think, as people are listening, to the power of community. We were
Mhm.
not meant to do this life alone,
Right.
right? It is so important, especially when we are walking in our God-given purpose. And so, Miguel, I loved how you broke down the idea of strategy. So I need you to do that again. But then also, Marcy says wow to what you just said. What I want you to do is to also tell me, this story and this experience that you've been on, this journey, has inspired you to live in purpose, right? You've owned your story. You are walking in purpose. So tell us, right? Break the strategy down again, and then tell us what your story has inspired you to do.
Definitely. So again, this is my working definition. When I started Googling what the definition of strategy was, I just did not like it. And when I don't like the
Mm.
definition, I say, okay, what does it mean to me? And I didn't like.
Webster, you were wrong.
Yeah, Webster failed me on this one. It felt like it was always aiming at war, or it was always aiming at a business
Mm.
sense. And so to me, my definition is that strategy is a defined number of steps to help you obtain an objective breakthrough. And so
Mm.
in that, the idea is when you talk about chess players, the most professional chess players, the master chess players, they can see 10 to 12 steps ahead. And the
Right.
idea would be, if I want to accomplish XYZ, what are the necessary steps to get there? And there goes strategy. Where oftentimes we confuse strategy with a plan, and that's not really what it is, right? You can have a goal of saying, okay,
Mm.
I want to eat healthy. Okay, what does that look like? Well, it looks like
Right.
me eating green things and red things. And okay, fantastic. What is the strategy to help you do
Yeah.
this?
What are the
Well, I'm gonna
actual
wake up early.
steps?
Exactly, the actual
I
defined
love
number.
that.
Now again, we have to pull it back, because oftentimes we say, well, Jimmy did it this way. I don't care about Jimmy. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about where you at right now.
I love that. That
When
should
we
be on a t-shirt, okay? Well,
I
Jimmy
don't
did
care
it
about
this
Jimmy.
way. I don't care about Jimmy. Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Shout out to Jimmy.
Wherever you are.
But understanding where we are is so
Yes.
crucial, to
I
be
love
able to
that.
set a real strategy and say, okay, these are the necessary steps. And it may take me, a little longer than others, but
Yeah.
again, we're not comparing ourselves to others. And so that's where, to me, strategy comes in. And in
Mm.
that, a couple of years ago, early on the pandemic, which is 2 years now, but early on, I started seeing individuals on Facebook that were posting about things that they would like to do. And I think the pandemic allowed a moment of understanding life. Life is only here for just a moment. And if we
Mm.
don't act now, then when will we act? If we don't take action now, when will we take
Yeah.
action? And
That's
I had a
so
friend of
true.
mine who was writing on Facebook, and she wrote this question. She wrote, what reaches more people, a blog or a podcast? And I responded to it, and I said, listen, you can do both if you're really strategic on this. And of course, that led to a private conversation, which led me
Mm.
down this road of helping her put in a strategy to launch her podcast. Her podcast has become highly
Wow.
successful. It's The Voice of Tamar. And she herself has been able to go other places and speak and impact other people. A
Wow.
powerful story. But that moment was not just pivotal for her in sharing her story, it was pivotal for me in realizing, wait a minute, I can tap into this and help other individuals implement a strategy, which, without knowing it at the age of 15, that was being put in me,
Into
that
you.
was being understood, because I was being taken in this road where I was becoming a leader in the church, which also parlayed to being leadership outside of church. And
Correct.
everybody
Right.
that I would train would have promotion, would have growth. And it wasn't until I had that relationship, that encounter with Vanessa, that I said, oh, wait a minute, there's something here that I really need to lean into. It was at that
Mm.
point that I started Miguel Lebron coaching. It was at that point that I started
Wow.
blogging. And then last year we started the podcast Strategy Rewind.
That is amazing. It's so powerful to get to hear those moments, those pivotal moments, right? Those kind of aha moments where God goes like, this is it, right?
Right.
Like it's always been in you, right? But it takes
Right.
it takes that moment. One last question. I guess, one of the things that come to my mind when I hear that for you was, did you experience any apprehension or fear in launching Strategy Rewind or LeBron coaching?
Sure. My biggest fear
Yeah.
was launching the website miguellebron.com. That was my
Really?
biggest trepidation, because I I knew I wanted to do that. I
Yeah.
knew that that was going to be a way for me to share in writing, share in whatever content form I could. So
Hmm.
to me, step one was putting out the website. And I remember that I searched where I would do the hosting, that I searched different websites to have an idea how would I design it, because I
Right.
designed my own website. And I remember sitting there before the computer, and just looking at the screen and looking at the prices and looking at all this information that for weeks I had compiled. And my wife looks at me and she says, now when are you going to do it? And I say, mind your business.
Right. I don't
It was that moment I was like, I don't know, I want to do it, I know that it's the next step. But
know.
to be honest, I was fearful of what of was was it something that people were going to visit? Was it something people were going to be interested in? Because okay, if I could help
Mm,
someone one on one, but now
sure.
it's expanding, and
To
were people going to
right.
be interested? And so when I launched MiguelLebron.com, and I began to see the numbers of, oh, people are visiting. Oh, people are hanging out on the website. Oh, people are sharing my content. That really
Mm,
gave me the courage, and gave me just the strength to say, oh, wait a minute, if they like this, they're gonna love this. And so
yeah.
doing the blog and doing videos and doing the podcast, it was almost like it was just the next step. It was, I didn't even really think about it, although there was some thinking about. I mean
Yeah.
it in the sense I mean it in the sense where I didn't second guess, is this
Sure.
the right move? I just knew
Right.
everybody who's engaging with this content and sharing, I know they're gonna like this because it's
Yeah.
in line with what I've
With
been
your
doing. So while there
yes.
wasn't any trepidation towards launching Strategy Rewind, doing MiguelLebron.com, definitely there was.
There was. And I asked you that question. Thank you for sharing that. I asked you that question because I think, it's so common for us to feel like this is what we're supposed to be doing or to see something that we believe that we're supposed to be leaning into. But then take those emotions and almost allow them to cause some doubt. Well, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? When in reality, no, there is some anticipation and nervousness and fear. It is normal, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's what takes courage, is to be able to not push past those emotions, but to truly kind of sit with them and say this, to feel them, to experience
Right.
them, and to then say, well, I'm going to push through this so that I can
And that,
get what I
as
want.
I mentioned, those emotions aren't bad, right? So understanding,
Yes.
hey, I feel afraid, or I feel nervous, or I feel
Yeah.
concerned. Okay, now that I know that I feel
Yes.
that way, what am I going to do with that? Because that
Yes.
nervousness isn't bad,
No.
but I can't live there. So
No.
what do I do next? And so
Yeah.
being able to understand, okay, it isn't bad that I'm feeling this way, really helps to say, okay, it's not bad, but it's just not the ideal state to be in.
Yes.
What is next?
Yes. How can I move past? I love that. Thank you so much. So tell me, right before we have you share where people can find you. So what's next? What's next in your dream and in your strategy?
What is next? Well, actually, this year my wife and I are entering into a brand new stage. We're actually
Mm.
launching a church. And so,
Wow, that's
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Woo.
So I've been working for 13 years in various ministries, or for over
Mm-hmm.
13 years. But in the last 13 years, I've been working in a ministry literally that started from a house church to now a church that has developed leaders and helped many individuals. And I've
Wow.
served as the associate pastor for that ministry for that long. And so
Wow.
after really just meditating and praying on that, my
Yeah.
wife and I said, okay, this is the year. And I said, all right, this is the year. Yeah, so
Wow.
this year we are launching a church, Grace Hope Fellowship. We actually
That's
started doing online
amazing.
classes the beginning of this month in March, and our first in-person service will be April 17th. So it's something that's,
Whoa, that's amazing.
yeah, it's, thank you. It's something that we've been praying on, meditating on. So, it's very interesting to see how all of the things on a personal level, how they've really moved me
Mm,
forward
yeah.
with regards to what is my God-given purpose. And
Mm,
in my personal life, I have established pillars, and I would suggest that for everyone.
I
And
love
to
that.
me, there are 5 pillars in my life. Number one is to honor God, and I look to honor God
Mm,
with my time, my attention. I honor God with everything He's given me. And number two is to love on my family, because I come from a broken home. And so to me, it's so important
mm,
to love on my family. Number three for me is really to just go ahead and leave a legacy. And so when I
mm,
work on things, I try to figure out, how do they encompass these pillars, and is it one of them, or is it all of them? And so to me, this next stage in my life,
I love
it
that.
covers all of these pillars. And it's so powerful to just see the strength in community. As you mentioned, we're not meant to do
Yes.
this alone. So wherever
No.
you are in your spiritual journey, I would just say tap into your God-given ability, tap
Yes.
into your God-given purpose, because it is there that you'll find it so much easy to serve. It is easy to
Mm.
just be you. And really, it's those things that come easy for you to do that you'll be able to do when you just tap into that.
So
So
that.
leadership strategy and all of those things, while it may seem overwhelming for others, for me, it's where I'm meant to be. That's my
Yes.
sandbox, so to speak, because
I
that's
love that.
my
Yes, yes,
destiny.
yes.
Yeah.
I love it, Miguel. Thank you so much. It was so powerful to hear your story and to really be able to see how you've been inspired to live a life of purpose and calling, and how these moments in your story really moved you to be where you are today. And now, getting ready to launch a church. So we're going to be praying over this for you, because I know, being in ministry with my husband for a long time, I know it is not for the faint of heart. So we are praying over you and your
Thank
family,
you. Thank you.
and we know that God will bless it. You guys can find Miguel on social media platforms and his podcast on all streaming platforms, right? Strategy Rewind.
That's correct. Yes, you can listen to it on all podcasting platforms. Of course, you can just head over to miguellebron.com, or you can go to strategyrewind.com. There, you'll be able to select your favorite platform.
Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm going to send you backstage and we'll chat in a second.
I'll see you then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And again, happy
you.
birthday.
Thank you. Guys, oh my goodness. I'm so grateful for Miguel's story, and I know and I believe that you were inspired and challenged. There was so much goodness in his story and his journey towards healing, towards restoration of his relationship with his father, towards moving in purpose, living out that life. And, I just want to remind you, and I want to encourage you, that if there is someone in your life that you see something they can't see, that you pour in, because there's so much power in our affirmation. There's so much power in being able to lean into somebody's experience and invest in them. But I also want to encourage you to look at your own story, to not be afraid of the emotions that creep up, but to continue to move towards purpose and towards understanding. Guys, I want to remind you, as always, that there are several ways that you can support What's Your Story Live. You can always just click share. Honestly, just clicking share allows other people to know that What's Your Story Live exists, right? Comment, share with your family and friends. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel where we do the live shows here. And then you can also go on any podcast platform and find What's Your Story Live, where the episodes will be up by Tuesday. So every Tuesday, the previous Sunday's episode goes up. Rate and review it, follow it. Again, just allows people to see that we're here and that we're sharing these stories and that you're being inspired by what's happening. And all of that is free. But you can take it a step further and and join our Patreon community for as little as a cup of coffee a month. And so if you want to do that, there's exclusive content and merch and other cool things that are happening there. But go ahead and join us there. As we wrap up this evening, I'm so excited to connect with you next Sunday live here. But as always, you know what I like to say, purpose is found in knowing, owning, and sharing your story. So the question is, are you ready to share yours? See you next week.